Ma'am, if you stop for everybody in this city, who's gonna stop for you? The words hit Naomi Carter like a stone through glass, sharp and sudden, thrown from the half-open window of a passing cab before it disappeared into the storm. For a second, she stood frozen on the corner of 8th and Mercer, rainwater soaking through the thin sleeves of her faded gray hoodie, grocery bags cutting into her fingers, her sneakers already drenched from ankle-deep puddles gathering along the sidewalk. The city was drowning in cold October rain, the kind that made streetlights blur into golden smears and turned every passing headlight into liquid fire. Naomi adjusted the hood over her curls and tightened her grip on the paper bag holding her son's inhaler prescription. $43.70. That was everything left in her checking account. Rent was due in 4 days. The electric bill sat unopened on her kitchen table. And Eli, her 8-year-old boy, was waiting at home with lungs that sounded worse every night, his breathing rougher, thinner, tighter. The pharmacy closed in 20 minutes. If she missed it, he'd have to wait until morning. And in weather like this, mornings felt too far away. Naomi kept her head down and pushed forward against the rain, her body leaning into the wind like she was fighting the whole world just to make it one more block. That's when she saw him. At first, he looked like nothing more than another shadow folded into the storm, an old man near the curb, his frame bent under the weight of the rain, one hand gripping a silver cane, the other pressed against a bus stop bench for balance. But then Naomi noticed something wrong. He wasn't waiting. He was slipping. His shoes dragged uneven against the flooded pavement, his coat soaked dark, his shoulders trembling from the cold. A delivery truck roared past, tires hissing through water, its headlights slicing through the downpour, and for one terrifying second, the old man stepped too far off the curb, blinded by rain and shaking so hard he didn't seem to notice how close the street was. Naomi stopped walking. Her breath caught. Around her, people moved faster, umbrellas tilted low, eyes forward, pretending not to see. A businessman brushed past her shoulder without slowing. A couple laughed under an awning across the street. Nobody looked. Nobody cared. Naomi looked down at the pharmacy receipt in her hand, the paper already dissolving under the rain. Eli's medicine. Her bus fare home. Her groceries. Her whole night balanced in that bag. Then she looked back at the old man. His cane slipped. His body tilted. And something inside her moved before her mind could stop it. Naomi dropped her groceries onto the wet sidewalk and ran straight into the rain, her heart pounding hard against her ribs, reaching for a stranger the rest of the world had already decided wasn't worth saving. The old man's body gave way just as Naomi reached him, his knees folding beneath him like wet paper, his cane clattering into the rushing gutter water. She caught him under the arms, her groceries forgotten behind her, rain pouring down the back of her neck and soaking through every layer of clothing she had. Up close, he looked even older than she thought, maybe late 70s, his silver hair plastered to his forehead, his face pale beneath the yellow streetlight. His coat was expensive once, she could tell that much from the stitching and the wool, but now it hung heavy with rain, dragging at his shoulders like dead weight. His hands were ice cold. "Sir, can you hear me?" Naomi asked, her voice sharp through the storm. The old man blinked slowly, his breathing uneven, his eyes glassy like he was trying to place where he was. "I am fine," he said, but his voice was weak, barely louder than the rain tapping against the bus shelter roof. Naomi knew that voice. Not the sound of it, but the lie inside it. She had heard it before from her mother in hospital rooms, from Eli when his chest tightened and he tried not to scare her. The voice of somebody pretending they were stronger than they felt. Naomi looked around. Nobody stopped. A line of headlights moved past like rivers of white fire, people sealed behind glass and heat, untouched by what was happening 10 feet away. Her jaw tightened. "You are not fine," she said, wrapping one arm around his waist and pulling him toward the shelter bench. He was heavier than he looked, and her shoulders burned with effort, but she did not let go. By the time she got him seated, her hands were shaking from the cold. The man coughed into his fist, breath thin and uneven. Naomi knelt in front of him and noticed something strange then. His watch. Gold. Heavy. Old. Not flashy, but expensive enough that it looked out of place against the worn cuffs of his coat. Not homeless, she thought. Just lost. Where is your family? She asked. The old man stared out into the rain for a long moment before answering. Not here. Naomi swallowed hard. Those two words felt heavier than the storm itself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. 6 missed calls from her babysitter. Her stomach dropped. She called back immediately. Miss Carter. Mrs. Alvarez answered, sounding worried. Eli has been coughing again. I gave him warm water, but I think he needs that medicine tonight. Naomi shut her eyes. The pharmacy clock flashed in her head like a warning. 15 minutes. Maybe less. Her fingers tightened around the phone. She looked at the old man, soaked and trembling, his breathing shallow. Then she looked down the block toward the glowing green pharmacy sign 3 streets away. So close. So necessary. The storm cracked overhead, thunder rolling through the buildings like a warning from the sky itself. Naomi felt it then, that terrible pull between duty and mercy, between the child waiting at home and the stranger sitting alone in front of her. She knew what she should do. Go. Get the medicine. Get home. But when she looked at him again, she saw it in his eyes. Not fear. Not pain. Loneliness. The kind that looked deeper than sickness. And Naomi Carter had known loneliness her whole life. Naomi stared at the glowing pharmacy sign through the curtain of rain, 3 blocks away and slipping farther out of reach with every passing second. 15 minutes until closing. Maybe less if the storm knocked the power out. Her mind raced with Eli's face, the sound of his breathing the night before, that sharp whistle in his chest that always made her stomach knot. She had promised him she would be home fast. Promised him the medicine would help him sleep. Promised him tomorrow would feel easier. But promises felt fragile in storms like this. The old man shivered so hard beside her that the bus bench rattled against the metal frame. Naomi looked down at him and saw the rain dripping from the edge of his silver eyebrows, rolling down his cheeks like tears he did not have the strength to wipe away. His hands were trembling now, not just from the cold, but from something deeper. Exhaustion. Maybe illness. Maybe age finally catching up. Naomi pulled off her own hoodie and wrapped it around his shoulders before she could talk herself out of it. The cold hit her skin instantly, sharp as ice. You need to get warm, she said. The old man looked at her, surprised. And you? He asked, his voice low and rough. Naomi gave a tired smile. I will survive. She checked her phone again. Another message from Mrs. Alvarez. Eli is asking for you. Naomi swallowed hard and slid the phone back into her pocket. The rain was getting heavier now, bouncing off the pavement like tiny silver bullets, filling the gutters until the streets looked like rivers. A city bus rolled past without stopping, packed full, warm light glowing through fogged-up windows. Naomi watched it disappear and knew she had missed her chance to get home fast. She bent down and grabbed the old man's cane from the curb, wiping rainwater off the polished handle. Her fingers paused when she saw the engraving near the top. W.H. simple letters. Clean. Personal. Not something bought in a discount store. Whoever this man was, he came from somewhere. Somewhere better than this bus stop in the rain. What is your name? Naomi asked. The old man hesitated, staring at the storm like the answer was buried in it. Walter, he finally said. Just Walter. No last name. Naomi nodded. Do you have somewhere to go, Walter? He looked down at the flooded sidewalk. Not tonight. The answer hit her harder than she expected. Not tonight. Like home was a thing that belonged to other people. Naomi looked up and spotted the 24-hour urgent care clinic across the street, its red neon sign glowing through the rain like a heartbeat. It was only 50 yards away. Warm. Dry. Safe. But not free. She reached into her pocket and felt the folded bills meant for Eli's medicine. $43.70. Every dollar counted. Every minute counted. Her chest tightened so hard it hurt. Behind her eyes, bills stacked up like walls. Rent. Utilities. Groceries. Medicine. Life was already balancing on a thread. One wrong move and everything could snap. Walter coughed again, weaker this time, his shoulders collapsing inward like the storm was crushing him from the outside. Naomi looked at him, and then at the clinic. And in that moment, standing under flickering bus stop lights with rain soaking into her bones and fear twisting through her chest, she realized something that hurt more than hunger, more than unpaid bills. Sometimes doing the right thing costs the thing you need most. Naomi stood there for 3 long seconds, rain dripping from her braids onto the concrete, her fingers wrapped around the damp bills in her coat pocket like they might somehow multiply if she held on hard enough. $43.70. That money had a name already. Eli. His medicine. His breathing. His sleep tonight. But Walter's breathing sounded wrong now too, shallow and shaky, each inhale catching halfway like his body had forgotten how to finish the job. Naomi looked at the urgent care sign glowing red across the street, reflected in the black rainwater like a warning. She knew what it would cost. A cab there, maybe $15 in this weather. The clinic fee, if they even took him without insurance, could be more than she had. And if she spent it, Eli would go without. Her chest tightened so hard she had to steady herself against the metal bus bench. "Sir," she said softly, crouching in front of Walter, "I need you to tell me if you are in pain." Walter looked at her through rain-heavy lashes and gave the smallest nod. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just honest. Naomi exhaled through her nose and looked up at the empty street. The pharmacy clock in her mind vanished. That choice was gone now. She stood, stepped to the curb, and raised her arm for a cab. 3 passed without stopping. The 4th slowed, tires hissing through the water. The driver rolled down his window halfway, warm air spilling out. He looked at Walter, soaked and slumped on the bench, then at Naomi, drenched and barefoot now because one shoe had filled with water and rubbed her heel raw. "Hospital?" the driver asked. Naomi nodded. "Urgent care across Mercer. $22, he said. Naomi felt the number hit like a punch. Half her money just for the ride. She looked at Walter. His hands were shaking worse now. She opened the cab door anyway. "Come on," she whispered. Walter tried to stand, but his legs gave beneath him. Naomi caught him again, her shoulders straining under his weight, guiding him carefully into the back seat. Her own clothes stuck cold against her skin as she climbed in beside him. The cab smelled like coffee and heat and old leather, and for the first time in 20 minutes Naomi felt warmth on her hands again. Walter leaned back against the seat, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Naomi reached into her pocket and handed over $22 in crumpled bills, watching half her future disappear into the driver's hand. Her phone buzzed again. "Mrs. Alvarez." Naomi answered quickly. "Miss Carter, Eli is awake," Mrs. Alvarez said. "He keeps coughing. He asked if you got the medicine?" Naomi stared at the rain running down the cab window like tears. Her throat tightened. "Not yet," she whispered. "Tell him I am coming soon." She hung up before her voice could crack. Walter opened his eyes slightly. "You should not be here," he murmured. Naomi looked at him, tired and cold and running on faith she could not afford. "Maybe," she said. "But neither should you." The cab stopped outside the clinic 3 minutes later. Naomi paid the rest of her cash at the front desk for Walter's intake, leaving herself with barely enough for bus fare and nothing for the pharmacy. As the nurse led Walter through the doors, Naomi stood alone in the waiting room, wet clothes dripping onto polished tile, staring at the last folded dollar in her hand and realizing that tonight, her son would sleep without the medicine she promised him, because she had given everything she had to save a man whose last name she still did not know. The waiting room felt too warm after the storm, but Naomi could not stop shivering. Her wet jeans clung to her legs, and her hands stayed cold no matter how tightly she rubbed them together. The clock above the reception desk ticked louder than it should have, every second sounding like money disappearing. 9:27. The pharmacy had closed 12 minutes ago. Naomi stared at the floor tiles, dull white under fluorescent lights, and pictured Eli at home on the couch with his little blue blanket wrapped around him, waiting for medicine that was not coming tonight. The weight of that truth settled deep in her chest like stone. A nurse walked past carrying a clipboard, and Naomi stood immediately. "Excuse me, how is Walter?" The nurse looked down at her chart. "He is stable. Severe dehydration and exhaustion. If he had stayed out there longer, it could have gotten worse." Naomi nodded slowly, relief mixing with guilt so hard she could barely separate them. Stable. Good. But Eli was not stable. Her phone rang again. "Mrs. Alvarez." Naomi answered before the second ring. "How is he?" she asked. There was a pause. "His breathing sounds tighter," Mrs. Alvarez said gently. "I gave him steam from the bathroom like you taught me. It helped some." Naomi closed her eyes. Steam. Warm water. Homemade tricks because real medicine costs money she did not have any more. "I am coming," Naomi whispered. "Please stay with him until I get there." She ended the call and grabbed her bag, ready to leave, when she heard her name. "Miss Carter?" Naomi turned. Walter stood at the end of the hallway now, cleaner somehow, wrapped in a clinic blanket, his color returning, but still weak. He held onto the wall for support. "You should not have stayed," he said. Naomi gave a tired smile. "I was making sure you did not die on me after costing me my whole night." Walter let out the smallest laugh, rough and surprised, like he had forgotten how. He reached into his coat pocket, fumbling for something. A wallet. Thick leather. Naomi's eyes widened. "No," she said immediately, stepping back. "I did not help you for money." Walter paused, his hands still holding the wallet. For the first time, his eyes really focused on her, studying her face like he was seeing something rare. "Not money," he said softly. He pulled out a card instead. Plain white. No design. Just a name. Walter Hayes. Naomi stared at it, confused. The name meant nothing to her. Walter pressed it into her hand. "If you ever need anything," he said, "call." Naomi almost laughed. Need anything? She needed rent. Medicine. Sleep. A break from life itself. But people with cards rarely change things. Bills change things. Jobs change things. Medicine changed things. She tucked the card into her pocket anyway, mostly to be polite. Then she rushed out into the night. The rain had slowed to a cold mist now, the city quieter, the sidewalks shining under streetlights. Naomi ran the 6 blocks home because she could not afford the bus. By the time she reached her apartment building, her lungs burned and her socks were soaked through. She climbed 3 flights of stairs and opened the door to find Eli asleep on the couch, his small chest rising unevenly under the blanket, Mrs. Alvarez beside him with tired eyes and a worried face. Naomi knelt beside her son and pressed her hand against his forehead, warm and fragile. And in that silent room, with no medicine on the table and only $1 wrinkled dollar left in her pocket, Naomi felt the full cost of kindness for the first time. Night settled over the apartment like a heavy blanket, thick and unmoving. The storm outside had faded into a soft dripping from the fire escape, each drop tapping against the metal like a slow clock counting down to morning. Naomi sat beside Eli on the worn brown couch, one hand resting lightly on his chest, feeling every rise and fall of his breathing. It was uneven, shallow at times, but steadier than before. The steam from the bathroom still lingered in the small apartment, making the windows fog at the edges. Mrs. Alvarez had gone home an hour earlier after making Naomi promise she would call if Eli got worse. Now it was just the two of them. The dim kitchen light cast long shadows across unpaid bills spread across the table like accusations. Rent. Electric. Water. The final notice. From the gas company. Naomi stared at them but did not move. She was too tired to be afraid tonight. Too empty. Her stomach growled, reminding her she had not eaten since noon, But the groceries she dropped in the rain were gone now, probably ruined or taken by someone passing by. Everything felt spent. Her money. Her energy. Her hope. Eli shifted under the blanket and opened his eyes slightly. "Mama?" he whispered, his voice dry and weak. Naomi leaned closer, brushing sweat-damp curls from his forehead. "I am here, baby." His small fingers found her hand and held on. "Did you get it?" The question hit harder than any bill ever could. Naomi swallowed the lump in her throat and forced herself to smile. "Not tonight," she said softly. "But tomorrow. I promise." Eli nodded, trusting her the way children do, without question, without fear. Then he closed his eyes again, drifting back into sleep like faith itself was enough to carry him through the night. Naomi sat there in silence, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of tires on wet pavement below. Her eyes drifted to the white card Walter had given her. It sat on the table now beside the bills, plain and still, almost glowing under the weak kitchen light. Walter Hayes. No title. No explanation. Just a name and a phone number. Naomi picked it up, turning it over in her fingers. Thick paper. Expensive. Heavy. The kind of card people with real money carried. But what good was a name? What good was a promise from a stranger? She almost threw it away. Instead, she slid it under the electric bill and leaned back into the couch. Her bones ached from the cold and the running and the weight of carrying someone else when life already felt too heavy. For the first time all day, the tears came. Quietly. Not from regret. Not because helping Walter had been wrong. But because doing the right thing had cost her something she could not afford to lose. Naomi covered her mouth and cried in silence so she would not wake Eli. The room held her pain without judgment. Outside, the rain stopped completely. The city grew still. Somewhere in the distance, a siren passed and faded. Naomi wiped her face and looked at her sleeping son. His small hand still rested near hers, like even in sleep he wanted to remind her she was not alone. She reached over and pulled the blanket higher over his shoulders, then stared out the window at the wet glow of street lights reflecting off the pavement below. Morning was only a few hours away. And Naomi had no idea how she was going to face it. Naomi did not sleep. She stayed on the couch through the night, half awake, listening to Eli breathe and watching the dark windows slowly soften into gray morning light. By 6:30, the city outside had started moving again. Car doors slammed. Engines started. Somewhere downstairs, a radio played low through an open apartment window. The world had moved on from the storm, but Naomi felt stuck inside it. Eli woke coughing just after 7, his small shoulders tightening with each breath. Naomi rushed to warm water, helping him sip slowly, rubbing circles on his back the way doctors once showed her. It helped, but not enough. His face looked pale. Tired. Too tired for an 8-year-old. Naomi checked the kitchen cabinet, knowing before she opened it that there was nothing left. No medicine. No extra inhaler. Nothing. Her paycheck was not due until Friday, and after last night, even that felt too far away. She pulled on dry clothes, tied her hair back, and got ready for work at the diner. Missing a shift was not an option. Not now. Mrs. Alvarez knocked at the door 20 minutes later, her sweater half-buttoned, coffee in hand. "Go," she said softly. "I will stay with him until school time." Naomi hugged her tighter than usual. "Thank you." The walk to the diner felt longer than normal. The sidewalk still glistened from rain, the cold air sharp in her lungs. Her body ached from carrying Walter, from running home, from the weight of too many worries stacked on too little sleep. She pushed through the diner doors at 7:58, 2 minutes before her shift. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. Familiar. Safe. But the moment she stepped inside, her manager, Rick, looked up from the register with a face like stone. "Office. Now." Naomi's stomach dropped. She followed him past the kitchen, wiping her hands nervously against her jeans. Rick shut the office door and crossed his arms. You left early yesterday. Naomi blinked. Rick, my shift ended at 6. He shook his head. And Martha said you were supposed to cover the late tables. You disappeared. Naomi stared at him. Cover the late tables? Nobody had told her. I had to get medicine for my son, she said. And then there was an emergency. An older man collapsed in the rain and I had to get him help. Rick rubbed his forehead like her words exhausted him. Naomi, I do not have time for emergencies that are not in this building. The words landed cold. Naomi felt her face tighten. So that is it? She asked quietly. Rick slid an envelope across the desk. Final paycheck. $87. Her breath caught. I need reliable people, he said. Naomi stared at the envelope, the edges trembling in her hand. Fired. Just like that. She walked out of the office numb, the sounds of clattering plates and coffee machines fading into static. Outside, the morning sunlight felt too bright for bad news. She stood on the sidewalk holding her last paycheck and thought about rent, medicine, Eli. Everything closing in at once. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Naomi almost ignored it. But something made her answer. Miss Carter? A calm voice said. This is Grace Holloway, executive assistant to Mr. Walter Hayes. He would like to see you this morning. A car is on the way. Naomi stopped breathing for a second. She looked up just as a black town car turned the corner and slowed in front of her like it had been expected all along. Naomi stood frozen on the sidewalk, her fingers tightening around the envelope with her final paycheck as the black town car idled at the curb, polished so clean it reflected the morning sun like glass. People walking past slowed down, glancing at it, then at her, confused by the picture she made standing there in worn jeans and diner shoes, holding an $87 paycheck like it was the last thing keeping her upright. The back door opened, and a woman stepped out in a tailored navy coat, heels sharp against the pavement, her posture straight and practiced. Miss Naomi Carter? She asked. Naomi nodded cautiously. I am Grace Holloway. Mr. Hayes asked me to bring you to him. Naomi frowned. Walter? Grace gave a small smile. Yes, ma'am. Walter Hayes. The name still meant nothing to her, but the car, the assistant, the way people looked at it, all of it said one thing loud enough. Walter was not just some old man in the rain. Naomi hesitated, thinking of Eli at home, of Mrs. Alvarez watching him, of medicine she still had not bought. I cannot be gone long, she said. Grace nodded. Mr. Hayes understands. The ride across the city was silent except for the hum of the engine and the soft click of turn signals. Naomi stared out the tinted window as buildings changed from old brick apartments to steel towers and polished glass. They stopped in front of a building so tall Naomi had to lean forward just to see the top disappear into the sky. Hayes Global. The name stretched across the marble entrance in silver letters. Naomi felt her stomach twist. Grace led her inside. The lobby was all white stone and sunlight, the floors polished so bright they looked wet. Men in suits moved fast with coffee cups and briefcases, but every one of them seemed to pause when Walter Hayes stepped out of the private elevator. He was not the man from the storm anymore. Gone was the soaked coat and shaking hands. Now he wore a charcoal suit cut perfectly to his frame, silver cufflinks, polished shoes, and that same gold watch Naomi noticed at the bus stop. Strong. Sharp. Present. But his eyes were the same. Calm. Tired. Honest. Naomi stopped walking. You own this? She asked quietly. Walter smiled faintly. Most of it. Naomi laughed once, stunned, shaking her head. You let me spend my last $40 on you. Walter's expression softened. I did not let you do anything. You chose. He motioned for her to follow him upstairs. His office sat at the top floor, surrounded by windows overlooking the whole city, sunlight pouring across dark wood floors and shelves lined with books. Naomi stood near the door, suddenly aware of her cheap shoes and tired face. Walter sat down slowly, then slid a folder across the desk. I had Grace look into your Situation this morning? Naomi stiffened. My situation? Walter nodded. Single mother. 2 jobs. Past due rent. Son with asthma. No insurance. Naomi's face flushed with embarrassment. Walter leaned forward, his voice low. You spent your child's medicine money on a stranger because you thought his life mattered. Naomi looked down at her hands. It did matter. Walter nodded slowly, like that answer confirmed something deep inside him. Then he pushed the folder closer. Inside was a full medical approval for Eli at Hayes Memorial Hospital, paid in full, starting today. Naomi stared at the papers, her breath catching so hard it hurt. What is this? She whispered. Walter looked at her with eyes heavier than wealth. A beginning. Naomi stared at the papers in her hands as if they might disappear if she blinked. Full respiratory treatment for Eli. Specialist appointments. Medication coverage. Follow-up care. Every line stamped approved. Paid in full. Her fingers trembled against the thick paper, and for a moment the room around her blurred. The city skyline behind Walter Hayes stretched wide and shining through the floor-to-ceiling windows, morning lights spilling across polished wood and glass, but Naomi could only think about one thing. Eli breathing easier. Sleeping through the night without coughing. Running without stopping to catch his breath. She looked up slowly. Why? The word came out smaller than she expected. Walter leaned back in his chair, folding his hands over his desk, his gold watch catching the sunlight. For a moment, he looked older than he had in the storm, not weaker, just heavier somehow, like carrying years no one else could see. 3 years ago, he said quietly, my wife died in a hospital waiting room because nobody moved fast enough. Not because they could not. Because they would not. Naomi stood still, the weight of his words settling into the silence. Walter looked down at his hands. Money cannot fix every loss. I learned that too late. His eyes lifted to hers. Last night, in that storm, everyone passed me by. You did not. Naomi swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She thought about the rain, the cold, the money she gave up. The fear sitting beside Eli's bed all night. None of it had felt heroic. It had only felt necessary. Walter stood and walked around the desk, slower now, softer somehow. He handed her another envelope. Naomi opened it carefully. Inside was an employment offer. Administrative coordinator at Hayes Memorial Hospital. Full salary. Full benefits. Flexible hours. Enough to pay rent. Enough to buy medicine. Enough to breathe. Naomi looked at him in disbelief. I do not have experience for this. Walter smiled faintly. Grace disagrees. I had her pull your records. Community college. Medical administration certification. Highest honors. You stopped because Eli got sick. Naomi's eyes widened. She had buried that part of herself years ago, under bills and night shifts and survival. Walter nodded toward the window overlooking the hospital building across the street. Sometimes life pauses people. It does not erase them. Tears filled Naomi's eyes before she could stop them. Not loud tears. Just quiet ones, the kind that come when something inside finally loosens after being held too tight for too long. 2 hours later, Eli sat in a hospital bed at Hayes Memorial, wrapped in a warm blanket, a breathing treatment humming softly beside him. Color had already returned to his cheeks. Naomi sat beside him, one hand in his, the other holding the job offer against her chest like proof this day was real. Through the glass window, Walter stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets, watching quietly. Not like a billionaire. Not like a man who had changed her life. Just like someone who understood what it meant to be given another chance. Eli looked up at Naomi, his breathing calm now, his eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. Mama, he whispered, smiling sleepily. You look happy. Naomi leaned down and kissed his forehead, the sunlight warming her face through the hospital window. Outside, the streets below still glistened from last night's rain, but the storm was gone. And for the first time in a long time, Naomi looked at the lights spilling across the room and believed it was finally meant for them.